guys, welcome back to ByteRipple. In today's class, we'll be looking at div elements, and I'll be showing you how to create div elements or how to create containers in web development, or when you are creating your web pages. So basically, maybe I should clean up this so that we have a better view of what we want to do. Let's clean this up. Okay. And let's go to this CSS styling and remove some of these styles since we don't need them here. Control S. And now we have this page cleaned up. So when we talk about grid in HTML or in web development, we are simply talking about how we create our web pages using using containers, which we call div. So let me just write a comment here for us to have. So today we are learning HTML, HTML div elements. Okay, and let me put an H1 here for us to, sorry, shouldn't be catalog. Then we say div elements. Okay, or we say we are learning. Is that the correct spelling of learning? HTML div elements. Control S. Okay, so a div is simply seen as a container in HTML. And how do we create one? We simply use the div tag. Okay, so that's the div tag. And now we have different ways of making this happen. So for instance, we can just simply, maybe I can write something within this div. I can say learning is fun. Okay, if I Control S, now we can see learning is fun. And remember that a div element, last time we looked at HTML block level elements and inline elements. So remember that HTML div elements are block level element. That is, they take the full length, like they take the full width of a web page. If we give this a background color, let's set this, let's have some inline styling. Style. Okay, and we say background. I think I did a little bit of this last week. Color, and we set it to red. Red is more obvious for us to see. Now we can see that it has taken the full width of this page, simply because it's a block level element. So if we want to have another div now, we want to have another div, you will see that this will jump to the next line to really tell you that it's a block level element. Learning is fun again. Okay, now you see it jumped to the next line, okay, to show you that it's also a block level elements. Okay, now in your website you will see things like you will see websites or web pages having different layouts. Okay, web pages have different layouts. For instance, if we go to maybe a random website, let's say we go to my website, Simon Azike, or we go to my food website page. Okay, so I actually created a website. Let's leave the login page. Let's change this URL, sorry, and we change this URL to just the home page. So this is the home page. Now let me expand this page. Let's close this. You will see that this particular page is structured in such a way that we have small cards here. Okay, each of these cards are made with a div elements. Okay, and you can see that they are sitting side by side. So this is made possible because there are some CSS properties that has been applied here to be able to set them to this to be able to make them sit side by side. Remember, we talked about block level elements. Block level elements are elements that takes the full width of a web page. But as you can see here, each of these elements, they are not taking the full width of this page. You have others beside them. So what we do is we try as much as possible to control their sizes and control the width of each of them. Okay, basically controlling the width doesn't still stop them from, maintaining their properties as a block level element, but we are able to apply some CSS elements that makes it possible for us to have multiple of these block level elements, of which each of them are divs on a single page. So let's go back to our VS Code, and I can try to show you how to achieve an example of what we just saw now. So to be able to achieve that, we use different HTML CSS properties, or CSS properties we use to style such, or to achieve such alignment or positioning. So for instance, we have two different elements, or they are the same element here. We can just change this color to maybe black, or we change it to something gray dress, so it's different from the other, and we remove this. So for us to be able to achieve each of these containers sitting side by side, we can simply put them in or we can decide to go style them. Okay, we use an internal styling to style them. So I can just come here, I can come here and say div, okay, and I say control, and we can simply say that so the first CSS properties that is used is float. So float has been used severally or for a very long time to style HTML containers. Basically, it's just used for positioning. Okay, it's used for content positioning and structuring. It's mainly meant to be used for positioning. And how do we achieve using this particular HTML property, CSS property? So we simply just type, for instance, we already have our two divs or two containers on our page. Now we want to resize them, so we can reduce their width. Okay, first we can reduce their width to maybe 33%. Okay, to 33% to reduce the width of the element. So now we can also give them some margin. Okay, so we can give them margin of 10 pixels to space them out. Okay, now we have spacing in between. Okay, remember that the margin property is meant to give external spacing to our elements. We can also give maybe some padding, so an internal spacing for the element. So we can also give it maybe 10%, 10 pixels, the units, so we have proper spacing for each of them. Now we can, okay, so now they are all, since div is a block level element, you can see that they are stacked on each other. What we want to do now is to put them side by side, of which we are going to be using the float elements. Okay, so we set the float element to auto, and we use that to restructure the position of this container. So mind you, we cannot just use this float alone. We have to use another property, CSS property called overflow. So let's add an overflow here. So we can say overflow auto, and we can control S, and we can actually put both containers in a single div so that we have a separate styling for the overflow. So we can say container. Okay, so then we move these two elements, Control X and Control V inside, and we Control S. Now we have them stacked on each other. Then we can now go back, okay, and restyle this particular container. So we move this auto out, and we cut it and we just come here. So basically we can say dot container, okay, which is the main container, okay, and now we can come here and say dot container, then we can say we are going into the, we set this to the div, the container itself, and we can go in here into the div, which is like the child elements of the main container, if you understand what I'm trying to do. So if we paste this here and we bring most of these properties, if we bring most of these properties into the child elements and we state it here and we control S, we can see that, yeah, we have those stylings are now applied, okay, so they are all applied now. And for us to be able to still achieve this repositioning, because the goal is for us to achieve the repositioning of the container, okay, we can give our main element a width of 100%, sorry, and we control S. So if we give it a background color for us to be able to see that it's we can say it's gray, and we control S to see the full width, and we can see that now it's full width. So the actually this float supposed to be with the main the div container, okay, then we have the float to be with the main container. Let's place it here, and we set it to auto instead. We control S, and now we can see that it's floating to the right, okay, and the width of this particular child element that we are seeing here, it's 33% wide, okay. And so this is one way of achieving positioning your container side by side within within a single or main container. So another way of achieving this is using the Flexbox. Okay, let's add more containers here. If you say Control Alt arrow down and we change this to maybe like green or something, gray like this, and we say Control S. So we have another one floating down. Okay, is flex is another HTML property CSS properties we use to achieve displaying elements. Let's control S first so that we see that we have a raw HTML div elements that do not have any properties for styling. Now we want to use another concept. The first one we've seen is floats, overflow. So float helps positioning the containers side by side or child containers side by side. And we can also use the Flexbox. So we have Flexbox, okay. The Flexbox is actually used to flex an HTML element or div element. So if we want to reposition this element into being side by side, just as we had for floats, we can simply say this main container, and we can say it should display its flex, okay, because right now this our main container is still a block level element, okay, but we want to make it in such a way that it allows for the containers, for the div elements within it to float, to flex, okay, for them to be able to stay side by side. We can say that so we've said flex, we can say the width of this main container should still be maybe 33%, as as we stated the other time. We can have some margin, for spacing. We can say 10 pixels, 10 pixels. We can add some padding as well, to be 10 pixels. Okay. And what else can we do? I think we can now just Control S, and we can have, as you can see, we have the same repositioning. Now we reduce the width of these elements of each of these child elements to be 33%, and that's why you can see that they are all side by side. Normally they are supposed to stack on each other. So we also have another way of readjusting or structuring our containers in HTML, and that's what's called grid containers or grid. So grid is also a CSS properties that we use in achieving this particular uh, concept. So we have display and we have grid as the value, the display as the property, and we can now say grid template column, and we can set the template column. So we can set each of the template, we can set the column to 33% for each of our elements, okay, for each child element, or we can set it to 30 so that each child element is now relative, the width of each child element is relative to the main, to the column allocated to this particular main container. So we have 30%, okay. And now if we now come down here and do container, and we say div, okay, so the arrow you see there is just to say that we want to go into another container within this main container, and we can say the margin as stated the other time to be maybe 10%, 10 pixels, okay. And we can have the padding as well, padding to be okay because there are no exiting, okay, padding to be 10 pixels as well. We can have the width of the container to be, so mind you, the width of this particular container that we are setting is for the child elements, okay, and the column is relative to the yeah, each of them, they are relative to the main elements, okay, to this main container, sorry, to the main container, because we have, if you look at our HTML structure, okay, we have the main container, okay, or we should just set this to main, let's say main, okay. If you control S, yeah, we have to go update the CSS property. So we say main and we control S. Mind you, we need to remove this, put this dash, then put the dot, control S. Then we can say control S main, okay. Okay, so we can see that each of them, they are together like this. Say we added padding 10 pixels, display grid, grid templates column. So each of them have, we used this property for each of them, and each of them are able to we are able to apply this 30%, okay, grid column, this 30% to each of the child elements, okay. So this is where we are missing out. I was wondering why we have that. Okay, so we can split this like this and put the dot. Okay, so always take your time when you're programming, so that when you'll be able to fix each, you can fix the problem quite easily. So now we have 30%, 30%, 30%. So there are each of the, there is in grid, we are going to go in depth when we start our CSS series in understanding the concept behind grid, because grid is a little bit tricky. Grid is a little bit tricky, but it's almost the same thing as a CSS Flexbox. So the grid CSS sounds almost the same as the Flexbox, but it has the ability to define more than one row and position each row individually, okay. It has the ability to define more than one row and position each row individually, okay, position each row individually. So now we have how many rows here? We have just one single row here, okay, and the space allocated for this row, the width allocated for each of this row is 30%. If I change this now to maybe like let's say 50%, you will see that the width of the first child element within this main element is going to change, okay, to 50% of the main elements of the main container, okay, of the main container. In our CSS series, the main CSS series, we are going to go in depth and explaining these concepts more clearly. Thank you for staying tuned and keep learning, keep coding, and as always, small bites makes a big impact. Bye for now.